Thank you. Do members have any other general questions about this? No, I can't see any. So then if we move on to our public speakers, and we've got two. First up should be Mr. Melchizedek, and apologies if I've mangled your name a bit there, but are you with us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We give public speakers 3 minutes to address the committee. I'll give you a warning at 30 seconds. And then just after you've finished, if you're able to just stay on the line, I'll just check whether or not the committee have any sort of questions they'd like to put to you at that point.
Okay.
Please feel free to start in your own time.
Okay. I'm Ocean Melchizedek, representing 5G Awareness York, which is perhaps the unidentified campaign body that's recorded in 4.1 of the assessment. I've made many representations to the Health and Wellbeing Board about the dangers of 5G, but these have fallen on deaf ears as reliance is placed on the advice of Public Health England to adopt the 20-year-old guidance from an unelected body, industry-appointed people, called IPNA. So my objection to this application for 5G aerials on the Park Inn Hotel is that an invalid IPNA certificate has been provided for this planning application, and I dispute the finding in clause 5.21 of the assessment, where it says that a statement that self-certifies that the cumulative exposure, when operational, will not exceed the IPNA guidelines on radiation. So the key words there are operational. So unless the telecoms companies supplying the 5G equipment are able to measure the radiation levels from not only the aerial that is subject to the application, but also all the repeaters, including from other telecom operators, that will be needed at street level to make the 5G system work. So you need to measure all of them. And that hasn't been done in my view, so I don't think that the certificate is valid. So finally, I draw your attention to the European Union's Parliament's concerns about 5G. So the relevant section, which I hope has been circulated by email to all of you, but I'll read it out now, that it says, this raises the question as to whether there is a negative impact on human health and environment from higher frequencies and billions of additional connections, which according to research will mean constant exposure for the whole population, including children. It then goes on to talk about other problems of 5G, and finally ends up with the EU's current provisions on exposure to wireless signals, the Council recommendation on limitation exposure of the general public to electromagnetic fields 0 to 300 gigahertz is now 20 years old and thus does not take the specific technical characteristics of 5G into account. So I think on many different reasons, I think the application should be denied. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you could just hang on, I'll just check with the committee whether there are any questions for you. Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask the Speaker what he thinks the health implications of 5G are to the human body?
Yes, there's numerous different ones, but the main ones works at the neural level, which is tiredness. There's also infertility connected. There's neurological problems, depression, suicidal, it affects your neurological, the ability to sleep, and a lot of the problems that we perceive actually in the world is perhaps coming from all this EMF radiation that we experience all the time, even from 4G. But I think 4G is manageable. 5G is a different league of risk to us.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any other questions at this point, so I'm sorry, Councillor Galvin.
Could I ask the Speaker what then is the difference in frequency range between the various levels? We've got 3G, 4G, 5G.
Yeah, well, the G just mean the next generation. Now, the thing is, there's actually a benign...
It identifies the three bands that I want to have make a point on.
Yeah, what's happening is they're increasing the frequency, which if you know anything about physics, If you increase the frequency, you reduce the wavelength. But what it means is you can put more data down the signal if you increase the frequency. So the next generation, which is called 5G, is going to use a much higher frequency, which is moving into very dangerous territory, which is affecting our human bioenergetic field and causing all sorts of dangers. So the difference between 3, 4, and 5 is between 4 and 5 is the additional amount of data that they want to pump us with. But to do that, they're going to have a ton more repeaters because the wavelength is shorter. So you need for your phone to work with to get the signal, the repeater will have to be very close because the wavelength is shorter. I can't really explain all the physics of it, but suffice it to say 5G is going to be horrendous. But there is a benign form of 5G, I should point that out. It just means the next generation. It depends what the telecommunications company will bring out. There is a form which can put higher data through a lower frequency. And if we get that, then I'll be happy. But there's, of course, there's no specification saying that they should bring in the benign form. They could put in the higher frequency one at 60 gigahertz, which is very dangerous for us.
Thank you for that. Sorry, I just need to check, Councillor Parrott. We lost you there for 30 seconds or so. Did you catch? Did you miss anything? I guess, whilst you're aware.
I did end up missing a little bit of that. So I don't know at what point it might be useful to sort of recap the question. I heard the question from Councillor Kilburn and then only the beginning of the answer to that.
Right, okay.
All right. Well, my recommendation in all this, actually, I've talked to the Health and Wellbeing Board, is for the City of Council York. It's a complicated area, I have to say. It involves understanding a little bit about physics. It's not complicated. Well, for me, it's not complicated, but I studied physics at school. But you have to understand the frequency and how it relates to wavelength. And as you increase the frequency, you reduce the wavelength. And that means you have to have a huge number of repeaters from the aerial to create the field which will then connect to the 5G. But there is a benign form, that's what I wanted to point out. But my recommendation is that the council should form its own little working group. It could only be 1 or 2 people just to investigate this area, to inform you, because it's an area that not many people know about. And my main driving force the work I'm doing.
Straying a bit there from Councillor Galvin's question, but I do think he had a supplementary point that he wanted to raise. No. He's indicating not now, but I do have Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask Mr. Melchizedek if he can quote a single peer-reviewed paper by experts that shows that 5G has any adverse effect either on the human body or on the biosphere, because I've spent the last week going through many research papers and I haven't found a single one yet that confirms what you're saying. The whole business about what you're saying about the increase in frequency and the more repeaters needed is purely because higher frequencies are scattered more and consequently they have a much shorter range within urban areas. I'd be very grateful for your explanation, please.
Yes, well, we've set up a website called 5G Awareness York, and I'm happy to send that to Michelle, who can then pass it on to you. And in there, that we've got a whole load of peer-reviewed papers and videos from doctors, scientists, and there's even over 200 scientists and doctors and medical practitioners who have signed a petition to the European Union to say this should not be rolled out until more research is done. Because you might say, well, there is no, what the IPNA people say is there's no conclusive evidence. What they're really saying is there's a lot of evidence out there, but then it's not that they deny, there are people who say that the papers that have been written aren't adequate to meet the requirements. So they've been dished by various people because there's a ton of money behind this, because the telecommunications money.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Melchizedek. Yep. I think we've got the answer to Councillor Fisher's point there. Councillor Webb, you've got a question?
Thank you. Where to begin on this? Essentially, could you give me the mechanism by which there is harm on the human body from this form of radiation?
Okay, so this gets into oxygen, and you've got to understand how oxygen works. Now, the closest knowledge I've got here is how microwaves work. Now, if you've got a microwave oven in your kitchen, you'll know that when you switch in that one, it's got internal radiation that affects the food, and it works at the resonant frequency for water. And what it does is it sort of alters the water.
Thank you. Could you just stop there then? I think
Yep.
yes. So you're suggesting that the water molecules vibrate. Could you now tell me what the frequency is that you're concerned about with the 5G?
It's 60 gigahertz, or something like 40 to 60 gigahertz, because that affects the oxygen molecule and will affect what's called the Kelvin-gated channels inside the body. Martin Paul is the man to find out about that. He's done a lot of research in that area. Dr. Martin Paul, P-A-L-L.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any further questions, so I'll thank you for your comments this evening, and obviously the committee will take them into account during their sort of deliberations later. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Up next then, we've got Councillor Baker, who's the local, or one of the local ward members.
Hi.
Hi. Yep, you'll know the drill.
Could I just add to the response to Councillor Kilbane's question quickly before I start my 3 minutes, that EMF radiation is also considered carcinogenic?
Yeah, okay. I think you've added there, but if you could make a start on your speech, and if people want to ask, they can do after.
Oh, fine. All right then. Thank you. So concerns about excessive exposure to EMF are widespread, of course, and span decades, and they do need wider public awareness, which is why I have called it in today. The EU Parliament, informed by the European Committee on Radiation Risk, is warning us of the inescapability of constant exposure to citizens in a 5G environment. They are now calling for truly protective limits and have highlighted the lack of consent that we're being faced with. So I'm asking you today, as public reps of York, to consider your willingness to consent to this issue, the fact that no person or animal or insect or plant on the earth would be able to avoid exposure 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, to these greater levels than we've seen before. So in this country, both William Ragg MP and Molly Scott Cato MEP have said that the government needs to commission research into this urgently. Glastonbury Town Council have called for a 5G inquiry. Our own MP has written to the Minister for Digital Infrastructure sharing our concerns, including a reference to the links to carcinogenic effects of this technology. And even 50,000 people have signed a petition asking the Prime Minister here and the councils in the UK to review the rollout of 5G. One of the things I've called in today is the effect on ecology, which is a valid planning concern. And the council's report you have says that, of course, the tolerance levels of the radiation have not been determined. Another EU committee says that there's a lack of clear evidence. And, you know, these leave the possibility of the unintended biological consequences being very real. And I would ask the council officers, what evidence have they reviewed about the ecological impacts? Have they asked an expert ecologist to input to this report? And if not, then I feel it is an inadequate assessment of the ecological impacts and that the application should be turned down. Did you also know that insurance companies are unwilling to insure on claims relating to EM radiation? Lloyd's, one of the foremost insurance groups, have a risk assessment report which went so far as to compare electromagnetic frequency with asbestos and saying that they would not, under any circumstance, insure claims connected with EMF technologies. Moving on to the Council's assessment of public benefit, I would ask you, councillors, to draw your own conclusion as to whether 5G is in fact essential for supporting strong, vibrant, healthy communities and for enhancing social and cultural well-being. I'd ask you to balance that with the needs to accept the mental and social detriment that can be caused by ever-encroaching technology in our lives. My conclusion is that the unquantifiable risks and the overdevelopment of this technology in an urban location is simply not needed in the same ways that it might be in rural areas that need to connect people digitally. It's not something we need here in York. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, that was my timer. I don't think it's ever reached 0 before. Sorry, Councillor Webb, you've got a question there.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Baker. I want to focus on the carcinogenic point, as the carcinogenic point, as in you're suggesting that this radiation can cause cancer, directly contradicts what the previous speaker said about the fact that it vibrates oxygen molecules, essentially. So again, I suppose it's a similar question. Could you just explain how it causes cancer? Because it's, you know, from the frequencies that have been stated, that shouldn't be possible.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Webb. No, I can't. I am not a scientist. I am representing significant public concern, global public concern, from many committees and the EU and many senior figures around the world on this. So I'm sorry, I can't, but I do not doubt it.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Chairman, I've heard all these arguments before when I think either the last or the previous generation went into being, with all the arguments on very much the same basis. And in fact, I think there was a report produced at that time. I think it was called the Stewart Report, which said that quite clearly at that time there was no evidence that mobile phone masts caused any problems whatsoever. One of the things that I can't get my head round is Councillor Baker and others saying that wherever we are, we're going to all be influenced. That's thee and me, you at Huntington, or sorry, at Wigginton, and me down at Bishopthorpe. Are we all going to be affected to the same extent, according to what Councillor Baker's saying? Because, as I say, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I've heard all this before when we've been looking at masts. As far as I'm concerned, I think I'm still on 4G, and it won't have any effect. But anyway, I digress, and I apologise. Can I ask, what's the radius of alleged damage from 5G technology?
Councillor Baker, if you're still there.
I think her mobile phone signal may have gone.
I think we may have lost Councillor Baker there, but
so be it, Chair.
I don't think.
Hello?
Oh,
yes, right. Councillor Galvin, what I do know is that the widespread rollout of 5G, which I'm trying to halt at this point, it's not widespread yet, but the eventual widespreadness of it would require masts every 100 metres. And as the previous speaker explained, the increased power and voltage from those every 100 metres is a huge increased risk compared to technology in the what we're used to.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. I'd just like to ask you how you'd respond to comments made by Professor Rodney Croft, who's an advisor to the RCN IRP, who said, and I quote, "The exposure that 5G will produce has been considered great depth by the ICN IRP, with the restrictions set well below the lowest level of 5G related radio frequency that has been shown to cause harm. And the WHO says the electromagnetic frequency exposures below the limits recommended in the ICN IRP guidelines do not appear to have any known consequence on health." Now, obviously, we've got two extremely prestigious organisations there telling us there is no harm. How come other people know better?
Right, I'm muted. Hi. The previous speaker commented about something he wanted to bring up as a concern with the way that the cumulative frequency hadn't been measured. I can only say that, like I've repeated before, I wanted to bring this into a public forum because of widespread public concern about the fact that there are so many unknowns and so much more research is actually needed before we can make conclusions about the safety of this technology.
Thank you. Councillor Kilbane, is this on a similar theme, or can we move on?
It's about 5G, Councillor Hollier. Is that okay?
Is it a similar sort of?
Sorry, Councillor Hollier, what are you saying?
Would you like to ask a question? But if we can try and keep it.
I think it would have been a lot quicker without that intervention. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Baker. In terms of the opposition to 5G, a lot of it's also linked to coronavirus and coronavirus vaccines. Do you think there's any link between them?
Thanks, Councillor Kilbane. I'm not here to talk about coronavirus at all, so no, I have no comments on that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Councillor Baker. I can't see any further questions at that point. So just thank you for your comments. Obviously, they'll be taken into account throughout the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions at this point for the council officers? I can see Councillor Crackhill.
Yeah, I'd like to ask officers if they could explain to us what are the public benefits of 5G as compared to 4G.
Chair, excuse me. In paragraph 5.7, there's a reference to section 10 of the MPPF supporting high quality communications. The paragraph 112 of the MPPF goes a bit further than what we've actually reported. And I'll read that out if that's okay. This is from the MPPF, so government planning policy. And it says advanced high quality and reliable communications infrastructure is essential for economic growth and social well-being. Planning policies and decisions should support the expansion of electronic communication networks, including next generation mobile technology, such as 5G. And it goes on into other things. So we are in our recommendation here, really following through on government policy in terms of
Sorry, Gareth,
5G
it doesn't say
rollout.
in the paper such as 5G, does it? Or I may have missed that.
No, sorry, that's what I said.
That's what you said. So you don't.
No,
that's not really answering my question as to what the benefits of 5G are as compared to 4G. Those comments are very generalised comments about electronic communications networks and technology. They are not comments about the benefits of 5G. We don't have anything in this paper that actually tells us what are the benefits of 5G, and we're being told that the planning balance is the determination of this paper is to be made on the planning balance between the identified harm to the heritage assets and the benefits of 5G. And yet there is nothing in this paper that tells us what the benefits of 5G actually are.
Yeah, I think what I was reading you there was an extract from National Planning Policy, which tells us that planning policies and decisions should support the expansion of such technologies, including 5G. So it's a national planning policy for local planning authorities to support this expansion. We haven't gone into details of how quickly you can download a film in one particular 5G as opposed to 4G. I don't think that's necessary for a decision-making process.
That's the example I found. Have I already? Yeah, downloading a film a bit more quickly. Yeah.
It's what I see on the advert.
Huge benefit to humankind, obviously, having to
Yeah,
wait
man.
a few less seconds to
Point of
download
order.
a film.
What has this got to do with the planning application?
Absolutely.
Everything.
It's at the end of the day, Chair. Gareth is a planner. He's not a technical man on mobile phones or anything else of that ilk. And I think we have to judge this on the information that we've got in front of us. I think this constant harping on to Gareth about what the benefits are is out of order.
sorry,
thank
Chair,
you.
but can I repeat that the paper says that this paper should be determined on an assessment of the planning balance between the identified harm that is still there to the heritage assets and the benefits of 5G. We cannot judge that if we do not understand what the benefits of 5G are.
To be fair,
It's absolutely about the planning issue.
That's a conservation
Okay,
issue and
John.
a looking issue. Let's move
Sorry.
on.
Yeah. Thank you. We're trying to move on. If we could try and keep it a little bit more lighter as well. It's going to be a long night if this is the general tone of the meeting. Yes, no, I think Councillor Craighill, you've reached the end of the point you're trying to make anywhere there, I think, with Gareth. So, Councillor Webb, do you want to continue?
No, Councillor, I was just going to raise the point that I thought that Councillor Crackhill's point was pretty pointless.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I can't see any further questions at that point, so happy to move into debate if anybody would like to make a proposal. Anybody's got any comments? Councillor Galvin?
Chairman, I'm going to move the officer's recommendations. As I said, I've been here before. I've heard all these arguments before, and not one of them has been substantiated. And as for the issue of planning balance, as I read it, it's not the planning balance of the benefits of 5G, it's the planning balance of the masts on the top of the hotel. So I've no doubt that this has got to be right. And as I say, I'm going to move the recommendation from the officers.
Thank you. Can I see a seconder? Is that seconding Councillor Fisher?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to second it. The benefits of 5G are well established. It gives much faster data transfer, which will enable research and many other areas to send communication around the world much faster and much more efficiently. It is huge economic benefits, and I have no vested interest. I don't use a mobile phone, as is probably well known, but I can see the wider implications of 5G will be hugely beneficial to mankind. So I'm happy to second it.
Okay, thank you. I've just got a couple more speakers and then I think we can probably move to the vote on this. Councillor Craighill, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think those comments are made on massive assumptions and not actually on looking at the evidence and not taking the precautionary principle in terms of our health and well-being and the health and well-being of our residents. I do have a lot of sympathy with the speakers and the points they made about the research. Obviously, a lot of research is backed by corporate interests, whereas other research isn't. The European Committee on Radiation Risk throws a great deal of doubt about the independence of the ICNRIP and whether it is a body that is suitable to take an independent stance. That committee was set up in 2018 and it is doing a lot of work looking at the health and well-being impacts of 5G radiation. There is a thing called the precautionary principle, and I think we should take it. However, in terms of this planning application, I understand that the government has done its best through the NPPF to stop us from making decisions based on taking into the account the health of our residents. But I do think there is a planning argument to turn this proposal down in this case, based on the planning balance as against the identified and acknowledged harm to the heritage assets. So on that basis, I will certainly be voting against this application.
Thank you. Councillor Webb, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Chair. I think whilst we've got, we've had the last few months where we have been in lockdown. We've got people working remotely far more than they've ever done before. We've got kids in this city who are having to do their homework on their phone. And if that internet connection isn't working, that isn't getting done. This is something that will improve communication. There's no doubt about that. And I think that the fact that we've got people who are willfully ignoring the scientific evidence, the huge weight of scientific evidence here, is slightly worrying. And in terms of the precautionary principle, again, I think you've misunderstood what that is. You look at the evidence, You look at all the evidence that is available, and there is over 150 years of research on this, and you have to go with the science. And if in the future the science changes, then obviously you make those alterations. But the weight of evidence in favour of this not actually causing any harm is huge. And I think it's really concerning that you're not willing to look at the evidence. But anyway, there we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher, was that a hand from earlier? Or?
I'd just point out to Councillor Craghill, I'm well aware, I believe as a scientist, as a former professional scientist, I believe in following the science. And I have spent a huge amount of time researching this. I have a background in astrophysics, which is obviously to do with the electromagnetic spectrum and its effects. And I have looked at this and I have yet to find anything that convinces me there is any harmful effect from 5G. So I'm not making this decision based on one report. I'm basing it on a huge weight of evidence from across the scientific community. 5G is not dangerous, in my opinion, and no one has produced any evidence to convince me that it is.
Thank you. I can't see any further hands, so I think we can move to the vote at this point. Gareth, if you could just give us a quick rundown.
Chair, we move that to approve the application in line with the recommendation on pages 15 and 16.
Thank you. Can I just check everybody on the committee has heard the whole debate? If you could just sort of raise your hand to confirm that. Thank you. And Chris, the Democracy Officer, if you could just conduct the vote, please.
Thanks, Chair. So we've had a motion to approve, proposed by Councillor Galvin and seconded by Councillor Fisher. Members, please state if you are for, against or abstaining from the vote. Councillor Craghill.
Against.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Tempted to say 5, but 4.
Councillor Culloch.
4.
Councillor Fisher.
4.
Councillor Galvin.
4.
Councillor Kilbane.
4.
Councillor Orrell.
4.
Councillor Perrott.
4.
Councillor Wardby.
4.
Councillor Webb.
4.
And the Chair.
4.
Motion is carried, Chair.
Thank you. So that is approved. Time. So it's 17:11 now. If we could all aim to be back at, say, 5:15. Just need a quick break to bring in the next speakers. So you could turn off your videos and join the breakout room, and we'll be back in 5 minutes.